I'm live. The Sagas of Icelanders. Why do I have this book? It's 700 and something pages long. I got to page 100 today, and it started with Egil's Saga, which is not Eagle, it's Egil. So I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Egil's Saga, maybe. The reason I bought this book is because I watched William Shatner's Unexplained this last week, and it was talking about the Vikings and how they went from Iceland and Norway. Well, I'm saying it wrong. They went from Norway to Iceland, and I thought, okay, up in that vicinity, some of my relatives came from Labrador, and that's pretty close. And then they started mentioning Labrador up there, that the Vikings were there, and that they had even went from Labrador to Minnesota. That is the exact path of my grandmother on my mother's side. She relatives were in Labrador, and then they went to Minnesota. And in that episode, they stated how there are Viking stones up in Minnesota, so that shows that they, traveled to the inner parts of the United States, which is pretty interesting. And it has direct connections possibly between them and one of my relatives' lines. So I got this book, but I had to stop at this point and tell you the most interesting facet for me. Besides, everybody thinks of them and their ships and wearing the horned hats and being bloodthirsty savages that attacked. They spelled out in the show how they had a lot of intelligence as well, built really epic ships that no one else could replicate. And there was a lot of interesting facets in this. I'll just give you a few pieces of it so far because I suspect I'm going to be giving you more as I go along, part 2s, 3, 4, whatever. But in this first 100 pages, I learned that they were real good at running, and they were real proud of the fact that they could run really fast because they basically, if they attacked your village, they were going to run after you with their weaponry and outrun you to the death. Because if they caught up with you, you're pretty much screwed. But there was one section in here in Egil's Saga, however you say it, where they're talking about how they're playing games. And it was quite interesting because they played a game with a bat and a ball. It sounded a lot like baseball. But these episodes, as murderous, rampage-ish as they are, they're still kind of funny because the one guy was beating the other guy pretty good in baseball, and he was bragging a lot about how he was whipping their ass, and the guy got offended and he took an axe and drove it into his brain. And I thought, wow, that's pretty intense rivalry in sports. Another one they were talking about, like it sounded almost like football, but they didn't mention a ball. But the guy tackled somebody so hard into the ground that he died. And then the other one that was really bizarre was this guy was sporting with his son and he was getting quite violent. And the wife said, hey, you might want to lay off. You might kill your son. So the guy got mad at her and started chasing her. She was running from him. And she jumped off of a cliff into the sea and started swimming away. So he threw a rock off of the cliff and it landed between her shoulder blades and she never came up again. So he killed her with a rock. These guys, man, they had some anger management problems. They could not turn off the anger and the savagery that they had. The thing that was weird about it is when somebody would kill somebody in their own town, they all knew each other and they wouldn't even bring him to justice. It was kind of like, well, he just killed him. I guess that's how it goes. Very desensitized to violence to the maximum degree. And then this other one, so this group of guys is traveling to another village of people they know, and they told the one person, you can't go because when you get drunk, you get out of hand and we don't want you there, so stay back. And of course, after they left, he traced out their steps in the snow to find the party, I guess. And then once they got there, the guy's like, oh, why did you not invite this guy or whatever? And then they continued to party with him too. And I'm not sure that he's the guy, but I think he is. he decides, he looks at this girl over there and decides, I want to make that girl my wife. So he went and proposed to her, and she said no. So they all left after their party, went back to their village, and he decides, I'm going to go back and I'm going to kidnap her. So he goes back and kidnaps her, even though they're all friendlies, takes her away from the one family, takes her back home, and then his group is trying to say, hey, you shouldn't have done that. That wasn't honorable to just steal that girl. You got to get approval from the father or whatever. And he said, no, I don't care. I'm going to keep her. So he kept her, and then they ended up having a kid together. And then finally, they had some kind of a peace offering between them and the other group. And they said, okay, it's cool. I guess we'll accept your peace offering after they kidnapped the girl. So really weird moral code these people had. And the section I'm reading about right now is they did have some kind of it wasn't a court per se, it was kind of like a court. And this guy is supposed to be deciding this dispute between these groups of people over who gets inheritance. And he's taken the one group's side over the other side. And the other guy is mad, and he's basically saying, I'm going to come back here and chop you to bits kind of thing. And he's like, well, you could have a war with us right now. And he says, no, I'm not going to do it when I'm outnumbered. I'm going to suggest that we have a one-on-one. And then basically the guy says no. And then he says, well, I'm going to come back later. So that's pretty much where I'm at. It sounds like he's going to come back and try to kill the guy presiding over this court case over inheritance argument. So I guess they had some sort of law structure, but not in a lot of the events where certain people just murdered somebody else. It was okay. No big deal. But it's super interesting. It's a lot different than the Homer epics, which were very violent and displayed a lot of battles and just brutality and murder. This has some of that in there, but it's more of a historical kind of, okay, we went to this place and we did that, and less of the scenes of brutality that the Homer epics display, more the informational about we conquered this guy. They were having a standoff between this other king, and they basically sent off and said, we want to negotiate before we fight. And the kings offered them something, and they countered back, and they kept spending 3-day brackets to counter back. And then finally they ended up fighting anyway. So it was kind of like they wouldn't take the dude's offer. They just wanted to fight. So, but it did say a certain percentage of them wanted to take the offer. So I'm not sure if the half that wanted to take the offer were more rational than the other group, or just tired of fighting, or if they thought it was actually a good deal. But the ones that wanted to fight more won out in that arrangement. So they sure like to fight. And it was just like, we're going to go take whatever we need and bring it back. We don't care who you are, and we're going to wipe you out. So not so much information about the shipbuilding and that in here, but more historical information. So it's pretty interesting so far. And then later on towards the back, I believe, is the one that involves the Labrador area, which is going to be real important to me because of our family connection. So that's part one of the Sagas of Icelanders, and it's almost done with the first epic, which is 184 pages. I'm at 100, so I'll pop in later.